Price elasticity of demand, PED, is a measure of the responsiveness of quantity demanded to changes in price. The formula for calculating PED is percentage change in QD divided by percentage change in P. PED is always negative because quantity demanded and price always move in opposite directions, according to the law of demand. Therefore, for the purposes of interpreting the value of PED, we can ignore the negative sign and use absolute values. PED can range from 0 all the way to infinity, but the most frequently encountered cases are those of price elastic demand and price inelastic demand. Most students of economics are taught that a generally flat demand curve represents price elastic demand. And yes, that's kind of true, but in this diagram where we have a relatively flat demand curve, we're only looking at the top half of the curve. The x-intercept would be off the screen. The demand curve continues going for quite a ways before reaching p equals 0. So yes, a flat curve represents price elastic demand, but as you keep going down that same flat curve and get closer to the x-intercept, demand will eventually become price inelastic. Most students of economics are also taught that a relatively steep demand curve represents price inelastic demand. That's because we are only looking at the bottom half of the curve. The y-intercept would be off the screen. The demand curve continues going for quite a ways before reaching q equals 0. So yes, a steep curve represents price inelastic demand, but as you keep going up that steep curve and get closer to the y-intercept, demand will eventually become price elastic. So, what's the main takeaway? Yes, relatively steep demand curves are used to show price inelastic demand because we are only looking at the bottom half of the full demand curve. And relatively flat demand curves are used to show price elastic demand because we are only looking at the top half of the full demand curve. On these two demand curves, D1 and D2, in both cases, price falls from $3 to $2, which is a 33.33% drop in price. But the change in quantity is an increase of 12.5% on D1 and an increase of 100% on D2. You can verify for yourself by calculating PED between those two price changes on the two curves. At very high prices, demand will be more price elastic, and at very low prices, demand will be more price inelastic.